But it's Tuesday, and you know what we get to do on Tuesday? We get to talk to our good friend, Odyssey NFL insider, Peter King. Hello, Peter.
Hey, guys. How are you doing?
We're doing fantastic. We saw in your column that you called the 49ers the most dangerous team in football. It seems that Vegas is calling them the best team in football. What are your thoughts on that?
I think they are right now. If you told me right now that in 6 weeks, the team that they put on the field on Sunday in Philadelphia would be healthy, ready to go for the playoffs, I would make them, I don't know about prohibitive, but I certainly make them the Super Bowl favorite. They played the best two teams in the NFC and put 42 points up on both of them. And so, look, they're dangerous. They're good. They just have to find a way to stay healthy, as we've talked about. I bet every week on this show, every single week, we have said, well, if they stay healthy, they're going to be great. And what else can you say? They got 5 weeks to stay healthy, and be healthy when the playoffs come. Now, the Seattle Seahawks will not come into Santa Clara on Sunday, and I guarantee you they won't say, hey, listen, we're not going to hit you that hard because we want to make sure that you guys are healthy for the playoffs. So, these things are up in the air, and we'll see, especially because 49ers play so physically. But, yeah, as of right now, no question, they're the best team.
And you mentioned if they stay healthy. Is it becoming more if he stays healthy, and that he being Brock Purdy, how impressive was it, Peter, the way he shook off those first two disastrous, quote-unquote, drives and then was able to go out and play like an MVP?
I think he just doesn't care. I think he has the attitude. I think we've talked about this, but remember last year after his game, it would have been 1 year ago this week against Miami. I'm sitting down with him after the game, and I said, hey, Brock, you're going to start a game in this stadium next week, your first start ever in the NFL. And on the other sideline is going to be Tom Brady. I said, what do you think of that? He goes, pretty cool. He's been playing football longer than I've been alive. And that's all he thinks. He doesn't say, oh, my God, I'm playing Brady. It is time to panic. It's like he didn't say when he's got all the Eagles buzzing around his head on the first two series. What I thought, look, what really was impressive about this game, we'll get back to Purdy, but what was really impressive about this game, and I wrote about it in my column on Sunday, or on Monday, what really was impressive was on the Juwan Jennings touchdown pass, the 18-yard touchdown pass with 13 minutes of the game left in the game that put the game out of reach. On that play, the Eagles sent a zero blitz. They rushed 7 guys. They just got 7 players back in coverage, so everybody's going to get singled. Purdy finds Jennings, short, sort of over the left side, turning upfield, and, it's a touchdown. But on that play, the 7 rushers on one of the best defenses in football generated 0 pressure on Brock Purdy. And what that says to me is 2 things. Number one, there was one heck of a blitz pickup by Christian McCaffrey on a linebacker who was coming with a head of steam. And McCaffrey is just sort of standing there. He's going to get leveled. But McCaffrey not only stood his ground, he stoned Christian Ellis. And everybody else handled their guys. So I really hope that, and I'm sure they did, I hope that Kyle Shanahan and the coaching staff showed that video and said, this is 11 guys on this offense doing their job, particularly every guy who had to pick up a blitzer. And that is why the 49ers are dangerous right now. If you read my column, it was all about McCaffrey saying, if you don't block here, you don't play. When we think of Christian McCaffrey, we think as this glamour guy, incredible player. We think of Kittle as this, this kind of fiery, colorful guy. We think of, Ayuk and obviously Deebo Samuel as these incredibly gifted, athletic players. But every one of those guys understands that being physical in this offense is the way to win. And that really stuck out in this game. After those first two series, Brock Purdy was like in a chaise lounge back there half the time. So that is what to me is such an impressive thing, not just the physical greatness that they have among those four leading guys at the most important four offensive positions.
Peter King with us here on 95.7 The Game. I think what you're talking about there, Peter, is why Christian McCaffrey never comes off the field, or almost so rarely.
Yeah.
I also saw in your column, you wrote about Dak Prescott's MVP case. Just one line. Cloudy with a chance of sunny skies in 2 weeks. It's no surprise to you, I'm sure. There's been suddenly a lot of MVP talk around these parts. So how do you see this developing over the next 2-3 weeks?
I think there's absolutely no way you can predict it right now, because 5 games is a third of the season, basically, almost a third of the season. And Dak Prescott's not winning the MVP if the Cowboys go 0-3 in the next 3 weeks. They've got 3 very tough games. Philly at home, at Buffalo, at Miami. He goes 0-3, we're not going to be talking about Dak Prescott anymore. But he goes 2-1 or 3-0, all of a sudden, okay. Now it's interesting. Now maybe he's quasi made up for the gigantic egg he laid in Santa Clara in week 5 of the season. But, there's a lot of variables. What if Tyreek Hill passes 2,000 yards, and what if he does it in 16 games? Remember, when 12 years ago, when Calvin Johnson broke the record with 1,964 receiving yards, he did it in 16 games. Now, if Tyreek Hill gets 2,000 yards, but if he ends up at 2,001, sort of limping to the finish in 17 games, that's going to be different than if he flies by Calvin Johnson in 16 games and ends up with 21 or 2,200 yards. So he is a factor. Christian McCaffrey is a factor because he's going to score a boatload of touchdowns. And as I said, I think one of the things that and again, look, I'm probably not going to vote for him over Purdy, but who knows? Season got 5 games to go. But his blocking will be a factor if I were to vote for him. So there's so much that can happen in the last 5 weeks, but it's definitely a contest. There's nobody who is far and away the leader in the clubhouse.
Okay, just because of the way you said that, though, just for fun, if it were right now, your vote would go to Purdy?
I'd vote for Purdy right now. Yeah, and again, look, I would. You know what my big reservation would be? Without Debo and without Trent Williams, they went 0-3. I mean, that's not total. They weren't missing them totally for all 3, but pretty much they were. And they scored 17 points a game. And I'm slightly troubled by the fact that he didn't play particularly well, particularly at the end of the game against Minnesota. He didn't lift his team when those 2 guys weren't there. They scored 17 points a game. That's not good. But I can't get it out of my head that the guy put up 42 points with nary a bad play against the 2 best teams in the NFC. So I don't know. That's why I would vote for him right now, but it absolutely is written in pencil at this point.
I appreciate your use of nary, and I just want to ask you in general about instructions they give to MVP voters, because we know in the Baseball Hall of Fame there's the morals clause, as people refer to it, and there are these strict instructions. When you are an MVP voter, do they give you any guidelines, or do they just say, here you go, go vote?
No. Say vote for the guy who you think is the most valuable player. And different people have different, versions or different definitions of most valuable, okay? But it's like I say all the time, okay? I don't know who. I really don't know. We got to let it just play out. But the one thing I've said to a bunch of people, well, if Tyreek Hill has a 2,000-yard season. It has to be him, right? And I have asked this question. If, for the first playoff game of this season, if Mike McDaniel were asked, he has a devil on his shoulder, and he says, I'm going to let you play this first playoff game with one of the following two players, Tyreek Hill or Tua Tagovailoa. You can't have them both. Who do you choose? And that's a dumb way to look at it, but it's I'm basically making the point that who do you think Mike McDaniel views as his absolutely must-not-lose guy as we sit here entering Week 14 of the season? In my opinion, it's Tua Tagovailoa, as great as Tyreek Hill is. I'm not sure how great he would be. I think he would still be great. I'm not sure how great he would be if Mike White were the quarterback.
Very interesting, because it might go the other way, too. I mean, especially with Tua admitting the other day, he's like, I can't overthrow him. I just throw it as far as I can.
Yeah.
And then, he gets there. Peter King with us here
I wouldn't argue. Yeah. I'm just telling you right now. I think Tyreek Hill tilts the field so much that if somebody votes for Tyreek Hill after he has a 2,100-yard receiving season, I tip my cap and I'd say great pick. And I might do that too.
Yeah.
But as of right now, I just view, in the strict definition of the term, value, most valuable player, I think Tua on that team is the most valuable player.
Do you if we comp that conversation to the 49ers, do you feel the same way about Purdy and McCaffrey?
I do, but I think it's close too. I don't know what would happen if Sam Darnold played. I don't think it would be as good, but how can you tell until it actually happens? Or if it actually happens, and obviously everybody hopes it doesn't. But I don't know what to say. All I know, like when I watched that game the other day, I mean, Deebo Samuel's had some very good games in the NFL. Very good. I'm not sure he had as big an impact on any game as he had on that game. The Eagles could not do anything with Deebo Samuel on Sunday. And I don't know, the 49ers are so deep when healthy right now at offensive weaponry that, and again, there are going to be people who are going to say, and I'm not going to say, oh, that's a stupid argument, because it isn't a stupid argument. It's actually true that there are a lot of quarterbacks who could play great with those weapons. And you're absolutely right. It reminds me of the time very early in my career I was dispatched to do a story on the Showtime Lakers. I was working for a newspaper in New York named Newsday, and I interviewed Pat Riley one day, and I said to him, what do you think when people say, Riley just has to roll the ball out there. These players are so great. His team is so great. And every year the Lakers had this great, great record. And he said, why? He said, I can't control what people say. They say what they want to say. But you know why I kind of sleep well and I'm comfortable with the job I'm doing? Because every section of games, I think he separated them by 10-game segments. He said, I tell everybody on this team, whatever that guy doesn't do that well, that his playing time is determined by what he's weak at. Okay, if you don't like pass the ball a little bit more in the next 10 games, after that, I'm giving other people a try because we've told you we want you to pass the ball more. If you don't rebound more on the offensive side of the glass, we're going to play other guys. So and so he wasn't just tossing the ball out there. He was actually challenging them to be better basketball players. And I'm sure in their own way, that's a lot of what the 49ers are doing as well.
And does that lead you to feel some kind of way about Kyle Shanahan? Because you wrote in your piece about Christian McCaffrey being quoted as saying it's important what you do off the ball. And I hadn't heard of that expression in terms of football. It's more of a basketball term. But he's got these guys to buy in on the importance of off-the-ball work. And is that just another feather in the cap of Kyle Shanahan and how great he's been?
He basically preaches to these guys, as McCaffrey told me, you're not playing if you don't block. And I I didn't ask him for an example, but McCaffrey was telling me about what an incredible downfield blocker Juwan Jennings is. And he said he's got to be one of the best in football, has to be, to willingly give up his body all the time, knowing that, hey, look, if you're Juwan Jennings, you might only get 3 shots a game. Come on, let's face it. If those other guys are healthy, you're not touching the ball very much. But he views his role in his world. I'm going to block like Hines Ward or Keyshawn Johnson used to block, and that's part of his game right now.
Peter, everybody here in the Bay Area suddenly this week knows who I'm talking about when I say Big Dom. What was your take on what happened on the sideline and what the NFL can do to handle odd situations like this one?
Well, I did not think that Dre Greenlaw should have been thrown out of the game. I watched that replay 6 times, and, let's be honest. I read somewhere that he threw a light punch at him. Are you kidding me? He basically looked like he was applying shaving cream to Dom's face. He barely touched him. And he touched his face. And to me, and I'm not trying to be 6 years old here, but who started this? The Eagles security guy put his hands on an active player who was the leading tackler in this game. Okay. And, if you put your hands on a player in the middle of a football game, I'm just saying the guy isn't going to say, sir, would you mind taking your hands off me right now? What is he supposed to say? And that's why, McCaffrey was right. Shanahan was right too. In that they say, what is a guy who's not a player or a coach doing in the middle of a confrontation between the players? And look, Dom didn't do this to get Dre Greenlaw thrown out of the game. I know this guy a little. Okay. He's not a bad guy. He's an employee of the Philadelphia Eagles who's trying to diffuse a situation that blew up in his face. So he's just trying to diffuse it, but the problem comes when you start putting your hands on people on the other team. That is going to start something. And that is why, in my opinion, Dom should have been totally focused in that case on putting his body between the 49ers and the Eagles and pushing his own guys back, not being in the middle of it and putting his hand on Dre Greenlaw.
Yeah, just agitated the situation more than he needed to. And I really think that we should be sending Big Dom a thank you card, Peter, because didn't he just help throw another log on the fire of the best rivalry in football?
Probably, but, I think that is so much bunk, honestly. Look, all the years I've covered the NFL, I never remember ever a guy after a game saying, you know what, the other day, I forget who said it. Was it Debo? Somebody said, it was Hassan Reddick. Hassan Reddick said, hey, talk is cheap, man. And that evidently fired up some Niners. I don't even know if it did, or maybe if somebody just said it did. But anyway, the whole story is there's not a single player on the Niners after the game, I don't think, and I read a lot about the game, who basically said, I played harder because Hassan Reddick talked trash, or I played harder because somebody talked trash. It just doesn't work that way. If you have to get somebody's quote on a bulletin board to make you more motivated to play a great game, go play another sport. How can you do that and play football? I think it's just, so much of that stuff I think is just silly.
Peter King with us, Willard and Dibs. Peter, it was clearly the Eagles took it as disrespectful that they were the underdogs in this game. But Vegas was trying to make a point, and now, based on the way it played out, do you feel like the Niners sort of exposed some problems, if you will, for the Eagles, particularly on defense?
The thing that I would be really disappointed at watching this tape if I were Nick Sirianni, if I were defensive coordinator Sean Desai of the Eagles, I'll tell you what I'd be really disappointed in. Where did all of our high-priced defensive talent go and highly drafted defensive talent? Where was Jalen Carter for the last 3 quarters? Where was everybody? I mean, I said it, on the game-clinching play, 7 rushers, no one got pressure on Brock Purdy. I mean, that is what would really be disappointing to me. And so, as I look at it right now, I think the Eagles are going to be absolutely fine. They're still the second or third best team in football, but, you know, they got punched in the mouth. And if they're really good, they're going to respond to it. And I think they will respond because I do think they're really good.
Is it maybe a byproduct of the spot for them, having 3 fewer days than the Niners, or is this something that you see as indicative of just how dominant the Niners are physically, having beaten their 2 chief rivals so decisively?
It's more the physicality of the Niners and the fact that the Niners, when healthy, are just better, I think. However, there's one other thing. You know, I don't know how Howie Roseman or Jeffrey Lurie can go talk to the schedule makers next spring or even next winter. But quite honestly, the Eagles' schedule is an absolute death march. And you look at it, it's one way. You look at it and you basically say, essentially, this is can we do something about not putting all of our tough opponents in a 6-week stretch? Because you look at their schedule. I don't know how they can keep getting up for these games because every game is Armageddon. You know what I mean? So that's why if I am the Eagles right now, honestly, I'm not really worried. I know we're going to be okay, but I just wonder why in the world do we have, whatever it is, I don't have the schedule in front of me, but 5 or 6 games that are absolute killers all in a row.
Yeah, it's actually like 8. We've been looking at it for a while. It's so intense.
It's brutal.
And they did a great job with it until this weekend. So, Peter, great stuff always. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks a lot, fellas. Take care.
All right, you too. There he is, Peter King.